Resident Evil undoubtedly has some of the most terrifying enemies in gaming history, and in this video, we will be taking a look at the many twisted and bizarre mutations of Resident Evil Code Veronica, from the tragic past of Nosferatu, to the sadistic mind of Alexia Ashford, all the way to some of the creepiest mutations Resident Evil has to offer. Here is the lore of every Resident Evil Code Veronica enemy. Alexander Ashford was the son of Edward Ashford, which was one of the founders of Umbrella. He helped his father study on the progenitor virus. However, Alexander did not possess outstanding skill in the field of virology, and eventually became a researcher for the Umbrella Corporation using his knowledge of genetic engineering. Alexander never became a notable scientist for Umbrella, though he did discover the gene that regulated intellect. He tried to use his discovery to revive the Ashford family's reputation, and took DNA from Veronica Ashford, the family's matriarch, who he'd become obsessed with. Alexander combined Veronica's DNA with a dangerous gene that increased intelligence and his own to resurrect Veronica. The result was twins, Alfred and Alexia, and while Alfred had only slightly above average intelligence, Alexia was a child prodigy with incredible intellect, becoming chief senior researcher at Umbrella's Antarctic facility when she was only 10. However, Alexander began to grow horrified, both at the prospect of the public learning how the twins came into existence, and by the two's total disregard for humanity. He became determined that no one would find out the truth, hiding the records of his experiment in a secret chamber in Umbrella's Antarctic base. Over 10 years later, Alfred found the room and began working to get inside, needing the 3 family gemstones to unlock it. The first 2 were easy to obtain since he and Alexia owned them, and eventually tricked Alexander into giving him the other one. However, when Alfred accessed the room, what he found out made him snap, since it revealed that he was just an unintended byproduct of Alexander's experimentation and the disturbing nature of the experiment. It was around this time that Alexander became concerned with Alexia, who'd become obsessed with the T. Veronica virus, a viral strain she had developed by combining the progenitor virus with Queen Anne's DNA. Alexia had also become determined to use it on herself and release it upon the world. Eventually, Alexander would create an experimental anti-BOW weapon known as the linear launcher, which he installed in the facility as a last resort to stop her if she carried through on her plans. However, Alfred, bitter that his father hadn't created him with the same intelligence as Alexia, decided to capture Alexander. He used his father as a test subject for Alexia's T. Veronica virus, and eventually Alexander had mutated into a psychotic monster. Deeming him a failed experiment, Alfred and Alexia, disgusted that he was a failure even as an experiment, chained him in a secret room in the Antarctic base, where he remained in solitary confinement until 1998. Hidden away in the facility, he became the monster known as Nosferatu to the workers, who became terrified by his noises. For 15 years, Nosferatu remained in the chamber, disturbing all the workers with his cries of agony. Eventually, Claire Redfield encounters him after finding the secret chamber in his office. She is horrified as he stares up at the ceiling roaring, where she soon leaves in horror. After Alfred's attempt to kill Claire, which was interrupted by Steve Burnside, resulting in Alfred's fall in the mining room's hole, Nosferatu forced his way out of most of his bonds and headed after the two, eventually catching up to them at the base's helipad. He knocked Steve off of the helipad, leaving him hanging onto a ledge, and then went after Claire. After a brief battle, she was able to kill Nosferatu by targeting his exposed heart, finally ending his suffering. Alexia and her brother Alfred were born around 1971 to an unnamed surrogate mother as part of Project Code Veronica. At the age of 10, Alexia graduated from a prestigious university and was employed by Umbrella Pharmaceuticals as one of its virologists. Isolated from other scholars by her young age and from children by her intellect, Alexia's only comfort was her brother Alfred, having already developed a loathing of her father as another member of the ignorant masses. Using the data she obtained from her progenitor, Alexia discovered a way to harness the full power of T. Veronica without any side effects, by having herself put into a cryogenic suspension for 15 years while the virus, slowed to ultra-low temperatures to a point where it wouldn't destroy her tissues through overly rapid mutation, matured within her unconscious body. In December 1983, she assigned Alfred to protect her and carry out her will while she was inactive, and proceeded to enter the cryostatic state. A decade and a half after this, she awoke with the first sight of her new stage being the death of her brother, who had activated the thawing process mere moments prior to his demise. Now in full control of her virus, Alexia sought to begin her plan of dominion over the world as its queen, and using her newfound powers, she remotely controlled one of the massive tentacles resting below the Antarctic base to destroy the escape vehicle of Claire Redfield and Steve Burnside. Also, she captured Claire and Steve for the purpose of subjecting them to her experiments and to make them pay for killing her brother. She imprisoned Steve in a coliseum with suits of armor and repeated the experiment that mutated her father, only with her own derivative of the mutant strain. Later on, she appeared to confront Albert Wesker in the replica of the Spencer Mansion under the Antarctic ice. There, she first evolved with the Veronica strain into the first step of what she envisioned was the true godhood, shedding her human skin and hair and turning into a powerful mutation that greatly resembled her human stage, with gray skin, darkened vessels and arteries, and growths covering her body as a form of rudimentary armor. She also controlled her body's blood, and her head forms a skin-like hair with a short fringe on the right and long to the left. She and Wesker engaged in a brief fight. Wesker quickly found Alexia impervious to any physical blows he could launch, and thus retreated and left Chris Redfield to fight Alexia, who soundly defeated her. In the Darkside Chronicles, the color of her mutation became pale blue, and her gray skin becomes darker and gains long spikes in each side of her head. Weakened by her first defeat, she once again attacked Chris by fusing with one of the Veronica mutant breeder pods, creating countless imperfect larvae to attack him, along with her tentacles, fire, and insect-like appendages. Despite this, she was beaten once again. However, Alexia was not finished yet, as she responded by evolving further, by ordering the insects that lay below the platform to cover her. Then she shed the carcass of the breeder pod and became a giant dragonfly-like monster using the ants, capable of spewing great amounts of flame and absorbing all gunfire. Nevertheless, Chris managed to destroy Alexia with an experimental weapon called the linear launcher, thus ending the Ashford family line. Alfred Ashford, otherwise referred to as Lord Ashford, was a British nobleman and governor of Rockford Island. He was the son of Veronica Ashford. Born through genetic engineering along with his sister Alexia, Lord Ashford was the final governor of Rockford Island, having overseen the exodus of the islanders and installation of a prison camp for enemies of the Umbrella Corporation. After he sealed away Alexia, the new Lord Ashford was left to continue his family's legacy alone. Driven by this, he overcame his grief and was able to graduate from a respectable English university in 1993. Lord Ashford entered employment with the Umbrella Corporation as the other Ashfords had done. Through the weight of his family name, he earned a number of jobs within the company, which, while senior, were largely irrelevant in the company politics. Alongside the position of director of the Antarctic base, he took full advantage of his inherited governorship of Rockford Island. By the following year, the Hispanic settler population was driven out to give space for the construction of a concentration camp for Umbrella enemies, a boot camp for anti-BOW training, and a private residence on the other side of a valley, where he hoped to live with Alexia one day. Having been given full control over these facilities, Lord Ashford chose to ignore the Antarctic base and built up a dictatorial rule on Rockford Island. Still affected by the loss of his sister, Lord Ashford's mental health shattered, creating a dual personality, one that remained the insane Alfred Ashford, and another figment took over his memories of Alexia, creating a new personality closely resembling her. Due to the fact he remained oblivious as to the truth of Alexia's apparent return, he lived alone in his house on Rockford Island, often allowing the Alexia fragment to take complete control above his body, dressing up like her and speaking in her voice, something which confused those who saw him from afar. There, he or the fraction of his mind that represented Alfred had long conversations with the Alexia shard and developed militaristic tendencies and a massive ego, as his mind further eroded. In his time as governor of Rockford Island and commander-in-chief of its base, Lord Ashford enforced harsh measures on the prisoners, and people were violently tortured and executed seemingly at random. He did not act on impulses directly, however, and instead hired the prison camp's schizophrenic anatomist to perform ritualistic torture on these people, providing him with drugs to use. A bridge was constructed that would allow him to directly cross over from the governor's official residence to his private residence in 1994, and the entire workforce was subsequently executed to silence them. His secretary Robert Dawson was sent to the prison camp after spotting him dressed as Alexia. As Ashford's career continued, his mental state became ever more so erratic, even taking his iron fist into account. His management of the Antarctic base was of total neglect, and had earned the ire of his workers at the transport terminal, who were repeatedly denied vacation time while perpetually behind in deliveries. These delays led to global shortages of various chemicals in 1998, which were directly blamed on Ashford. In the middle of 1998, Umbrella HQ became aware of an apparent HCF spy ring on Rockford Island, and determined that the source of research leaks held a prominent role on the island. Believing an attack on the island was imminent, a T-078 Tyrant was shipped over, with the intent on using it against attackers. In December 1998, HCF finally attacked Rockford Island, with their operative within the military training camp detonating an explosive in its tab, leading to the T-virus strain escaping as an airborne pathogen. As with the Mansion incident, this T-virus strain quickly returned to its normal method of transmission after infecting a number of people. Those not killed by the carpet bombing or by HCF found themselves infected or killed by their own men. Ashford escaped with the disaster and armed himself with a sniper rifle for protection. He incorrectly determined one of the spies to be Claire Redfield, a prisoner newly transferred to the base, and made several attempts on her life. Switching between his Alfred and Alexia personas, he led Redfield and fellow survivor Steve Burnside to think for a time they were two people. After a confrontation at the private residence, Ashford departed back to the training camp, where he set off the auto-destruct for the island facilities, unleashed the T-078 Tyrant to take out survivors, and fled in his personal Harrier jet to the Antarctic base. However, upon arriving at the site, Lord Ashford found that the facility was overtaken by zombies that escaped from the planes that had evacuated from Rockford Island after the HCF attack. This caused Ashford to take shelter in his office. Sources differ as to how Ashford died after reaching the Antarctic base. In one account, he found Redfield and Burnside there and once again tried to kill them, but was shot and fell down into a pit, where he dragged himself to the cryogenics laboratory where his sister Alexia was and freed her, ultimately dying in her arms due to the severity of his injuries. If that account is true, Alfred's body would be stored in the same capsule where Alexia had hibernated, only for it to be discovered by Chris Redfield upon his further exploration of the base. Another account of his death suggests that Alfred was strangled to death by his own sister shortly after he freed her as punishment for being late in awakening her. Whatever happened in both accounts, Alfred died shortly after his sister was awakened from her confinement.
You're finally awake, Alexia.
Albert Wesker, an iconic enemy to the series, returns in Code Veronica to continue his story. Following the acquisition of Golgotha, a virus created by William Birkin, the organization began sending their military group, HCF, out on raids to Umbrella bases to recover data and bioweapon samples. Wesker led a raid on Rockford Island in December of 1998. Remembering Alexia Ashford's research on T Veronica, the Ashford-owned island was a logical place to begin their search. Soldiers arrived on the island ahead of the main assault and planted explosives within the military training center. Much of the island's infrastructure was destroyed in the subsequent bombing by HCF's aircraft, followed by the deployment of special teams searching for T Veronica samples, of which Wesker took direct involvement. They were unsuccessful in locating samples on the island, though Wesker did discover Claire Redfield, Chris's younger sister, had been taken captive by Umbrella and imprisoned in its concentration camp. Chris arrived the following day looking for her. Wesker was interrupted on both occasions occasions when about to kill them, and soon after left the island after discovering Alexia was alive and well at Umbrella's Antarctic base. The facility itself had also fallen to a T-virus outbreak after refugees from Rockford Island fled there, but the team succeeded in entering it through a submarine pen. Finding himself in an underground mansion, Wesker met Alexia for the first time and demanded she hand herself over to provide him with a sample. She refused and began mutating into a more powerful form, which even Wesker was unprepared for, and he was forced to flee the mansion.
You're coming with me. Chris! Wesker. Chris, since you're one of my best men, I'll let you handle this.
Not long after, HCF discovered the body of Steve Burnside, a teenager Alexia had recently used as a T Veronica test subject. After collecting samples, they returned to the submarine. Having discovered Chris and Claire in Antarctica, Wesker finally took advantage of the opportunity to eliminate the two. Initially taking Claire hostage and dragging her to the submarine, he was persuaded to let her run on the promise of a fight with Chris. Though he was able to dominate Chris with little effort, Chris got the better of him by dropping metal girders onto him.
Sure, I'm not human anymore, but just look at the power I've gained. Magnificent, don't you think?
With the facility close to self-destruction and his skin burnt by fire, Wesker gave up and left for the submarine. The Alexia Pod was part of a huge plant-like organism called Veronica plant, resting under the Antarctic base, with which the T Veronica infected Alexia Ashford shared a symbiotic relationship. It is unknown who created the plant, although Alexia is perhaps the one behind its creation during her experiment with the T Veronica virus. The Alexia Pod became active at around the same time as Alexia's revival. The plant possessed a number of large mutated plant vines, which extend throughout the terminal and were controlled by Alexia. The tentacles possess great speed and strength, being fast enough to catch up to Steve Burnside and Claire Redfield's fleeing snowmobile in Antarctica, and strong enough to deliver a devastating blow to Steve's mutant form. The plant seemingly had mutagenic properties. As Alexia Ashford changed into her second form, the pods had assisted her mutation by supplying the additional biomass required to become larger. The Bandersnatch was a Tyrant BOW model type developed by the Umbrella Corporation in 1998. This creature was developed as an offshoot of the Tyrant project, intended for reasons of practicality. The reason for this was simple. Those with the necessary genes to be turned into Tyrants were smaller in number, and the Tyrants themselves were expensive to develop. In short, the Bandersnatch was a cost-effective alternative proposal. Due to the flawed/cost-effective processes used in their creation, parts of their anatomy tended to waste away within moments of their creation. These parts were often their left arms. In December of 1998, a number of Bandersnatches were stored at the Rockford Island Military Training Center to accumulate combat data against trained anti-BOW soldiers. These BOWs saw active combat during the HCF raid on the island, which resulted in a T-virus outbreak. Dr. Albert Wesker, who led the attack, obtained the Bandersnatch research data for further experimentation. The Jabberwock S3 was the product of this research. The Bandersnatch has some physical similarities to the Tyrant it was meant to emulate, being a large, bulky humanoid mutant. However, it is far too grotesque to even pass as a human. Its skin is sickly yellow and lined with disgustingly bloated red blood vessels. The head has decayed and seemingly liquefied, with visible strands of flesh connected to the shoulders and chest as a result. The Bandersnatch's face is nearly skeletal in appearance, although its eyes appear functional. Like the Tyrant, the Bandersnatch's arms are its most drastic mutations, but to an extreme extent. Its left arm has atrophied entirely, leaving little more than a small stump. On the other hand, its right arm becomes enormous, muscular, and elastic. The BOW can use this arm to pull itself long distances, even grasping ledges and walkways in multi-story buildings like an organic grappling hook, which compensates for the comparative weakness of its lower extremities. Its large arm also serves as its main weapon in battle, being used to hold projectiles, whip enemies, throw enemies around, or crush their skulls. The Gulp Worm was created by the administration of the T-Virus as part of a bioweapons experiment to improve the Earthworm genome. The series was still in the prototype stages during the Rockford Island incident, and the only known sample was used as a practice opponent for Rockford Island's anti-BOW trainees. It was encountered twice at the Umbrella Corporation's prison facility on Rockford Island. The first time it was encountered, it attacked Claire Redfield while she was exploring the military training field. Later, it was killed by Chris Redfield soon after it swallowed Rodrigo whole. Gulp Worm hunts through the use of its highly sensitive exterior, by feeling vibrations emitted through sound and during movement. If it senses prey, the Gulp Worm will launch its considerable mass towards its target, generally knocking it to the ground or consuming it whole. Gulp Worms have an enlarged digestive system capable of digesting a human whole. The Moth was a creature that mutated due to prolonged exposure to the T-Virus. Unlike the giant moths from previous games, these moths' wings have grown in perfect proportion to their bodies. This gives these moths incredible maneuverability. Some of these creatures were encountered in the Antarctic base, where they were able to produce poisonous dust, and had also taken to attaching eggs to bodies cocooned in the corridors. These eggs would later hatch into parasitic larvae that would seek out fresh prey, latching on and poisoning them to eat them at their leisure upon death. The Black Widow was a bioorganic weapon produced by Umbrella as part of their development program into arachnid-based weaponry. By October of 1998, Umbrella had collected much data on arachnid reactions to the T-Virus from the series of incidents which took place in and around Raccoon City that year, with the Widow spiders possessing a much stronger venom in comparison to the tarantula spiders seen in Raccoon City. They were selected as prime test examples. The Black Widows were already being developed by Umbrella by December 1998. The company had plans to distribute them to a number of their facilities via the transport terminal in the Antarctic base. During the Antarctic outbreak of the T-Virus, the Black Widows being transported took advantage of the emergency to break out of their crates and settle around the facility. Like many spiders, the Black Widow possessed 4 pairs of legs. The Black Widow's appearance was disambiguated from the other spider-based BOWs by its complete lack of body hair. One of these spiders, just like the Black Tiger, reacted differently to the T-Virus than others of its kind, and again, like the Black Tiger, reacted by growing significantly larger. The Sweeper was a variation of the Hunter II, differentiated from their unaltered brethren by their reddish skin. The intention of the Sweeper design was for it to sweep through previously attacked areas to mop up anything left. Other differences included their purple veins and scales that were of a light purple color, along with red piercing eyes. They attacked in the same manner of the Hunter II. However, unlike other Hunter types, their claws had an added poisonous effect, making them considerably more dangerous. The ants were an unnamed mutant species of ant created through the DNA-altering effects of the T. Veronica virus. The species is believed extinct following the destruction of the Antarctic base in 1998. This species was created in 1983 as part of research by Dr. Alexia Ashford. They were not destroyed or contained when her research was finished, and flourished in the Antarctic base in the 15 years she was kept in cold sleep. By 1998, they had constructed a towering ant hill as their hive continued to swell in numbers, though this was soon after destroyed along with the Antarctic base. These ants, enhanced by the virus, grew to larger than average proportions due to excessive production of growth hormones. These changes also affected their behavior, making them more aggressive to the point of openly attacking nearby humans. Unlike other mutants created through various strains of the T virus, the ants remained fertile and were able to propagate their species rather than relying on the use of cloning methods. The Albinoid is the result of the T-virus having been injected into salamanders. The effect is the same with simpler animals injected with the T-virus, being considerable growth with some mutation. Albinoid, unlike most Umbrella bioweapons, undergoes metamorphosis. As a baby, they are tadpole-like in appearance. Albinoids reach full maturity in just over 12 hours. When mature, these creatures are over 2 meters in length and have 4 legs, which are shaped like human arms. Albinoid adults gain strong electrical abilities and can cause serious harm to prey in the water. Immature albinoids can generate a moderately powerful electric shock to stun prey in close proximity. These infants are encountered by Claire Redfield in the BOW lab of the Military Training Center, where they broke into the laboratory she was in. Although relatively weak in this state, they will grow to adulthood in a matter of 10 hours or more. Chris Redfield encounters this creature fully grown in a pool of water in the basement of the training facility, where it is unwittingly guarding an eagle plate needed to progress to the next area. This adult albinoid is extremely difficult to engage in its aquatic habitat due to its powerful electrical discharges. However, its unwillingness to leave the pool allows for the player to engage it from the sides without fear of getting shocked. T-078 was a tyrant born from cloning by Umbrella in 1998. It was from the clone T-103 model, and part of its mass-produced type. 078 was noted for being without a limiter coat, so as to test the effects of using a T-103 without such a device. Therefore, its blunted claws, which are used as battering rams, may not be present on all other individuals within the mass-produced type. T-078 was delivered to Rockford Island from the Antarctic Transport Terminal in a mission supervised by the Umbrella Security Service Agent Hunk, on the orders of the island base's commander Alfred Ashford. Whether on Lord Ashford's orders or the intention of its creators, T-078's power limiter was disabled, allowing it to experience minor mutations. During the HCF's attack on Rockford Island, Lord Ashford unleashed the tyrant to kill Claire Redfield and Steve Burnside, 2 prisoners that were making their escape. While the tyrant was seemingly defeated before reaching the prisoners, it managed to grab a hold of the plane as it escaped the island moments before a series of explosions destroyed much of the base. Boarding the plane via the cargo bay door, the tyrant's right hand mutated further, which extended his claws. Claire was able to release a cargo crate from its safety harness, allowing it to be thrown into the BOW, sending both out into the sea below. The Hunter 2, also known simply as the Improved Hunter, was an enhanced model of the Hunter BOW line developed by the rival company of Umbrella in 1998. A derivation from Umbrella's Hunter BOW program, the Hunter 2's origins were the result of Albert Wesker providing a rival organization with Umbrella's classified development data and embryos of the prototype Hunter Alpha. The first known usage of Hunter 2 was by the rival company's Special Forces Unit HCF during their attack on Rockford Island. This model was far more intelligent than Umbrella's model, as it could track down its target through an automated surveillance device called a Seeker, which directed the Hunter to target with a special frequency. The frequency is presumably received by the special device on the left side of the Hunter's head that also comes with an eyepiece. These creatures are first encountered by Chris Redfield on Rockford Island shortly after the appearance of Albert Wesker. Code Veronica includes many enemies from previous entries in the series, including zombies, bats, and zombie dogs. Just like previous games, these enemies became heavily mutated as a result of the T-virus spread on Rockford Island and the Antarctic facility. Steve Burnside was a prisoner sent to Rockford Island along with his father. This was due to his father, an Umbrella ploy that was selling the company's secrets at auction, being ultimately caught red-handed. He and Steve are taken prisoner while Steve's mother was killed. Steve and his father are imprisoned in Rockford Island's prison until it was taken over by the HCF. During the course of his escape, Steve and his father became separated. However, Steve managed to survive the zombie onslaught caused by the sudden outbreak of the experimental T-virus. Sometime later, Steve Steve met Claire after attacking her on the presumption that she was a zombie. However, Claire shot the light that he shined on her and defended herself. These actions caused Steve to realize his error and ultimately met her face to face. Steve left Claire in order to procure an airplane to escape the island. When Steve was found again in the monitoring room, he was looking the information up on Chris Redfield. When Claire asked him what he was doing there, Steve asked Claire if Chris was her relative. Claire asked him if he meant her brother, and Steve realized the fact that they were siblings. After Claire emailed Leon to tell Chris that he was being monitored, as well as the coordinates of the island, Steve said that Chris would not come, and Claire would just end up disappointed if she relied on others. Steve then stormed out of the room. Steve took the gold Lugers and the island's palace. Because of his attitude, he did not realize that he could put them back and disable the trap that he set off. When Claire released the trap, Steve claimed the Lugers, saying that he found them and that he was keeping them. Then he proposed a deal to Claire, a fully automatic gun for the Lugers. When Claire was thinking, Steve said that he would see her around and bolted out of the room, leaving Claire alone once more. When Claire was almost killed by a Bandersnatch, Steve jumped through a window and shot the creature. While he was still looking for Claire, he shot the Bandersnatch at least 5 times before looking at it. After Steve kicked the BOW, he shot it one last time before the Lugers ran out of ammunition. Because Claire had the submachine guns with her, she gave them to Steve in return for his Lugers. He found out that they were empty and accused Claire of cheating. When Steve learned that there was a full magazine for the machine guns, Steve gave Claire a boost so she could retrieve it. After Steve took the full magazine, Alfred Ashford took both Claire and Steve down to the B1 floor, thinking that they would die there. However, Steve cleared out all of the zombies from their path, so Claire was able to go through easily. Steve said to Claire when she arrived that the machine guns are a lot more reliable than any person. After Claire asked Steve where his family was, he was enraged. When they reached the second floor, Steve and Claire both fell off an unstable part of a walkway. In the aftermath of the fall, Claire's foot became trapped under the rubble. As Steve got onto his feet, he encountered his father, now infected with the T-virus. Unable to shoot him, Steve was unable to act. Just when it seemed that he would reach Steve, Claire unintentionally attracted his father's attention. Steve shot his infected father down just as he was about to bite Claire. However, in shooting his father, Steve completely depleted the ammunition loaded into his submachine guns. After coming to grips with what he did, Steve told Claire about how he and his father came to be on the island. Afterward, Claire left Steve alone to continue with coming to grips with his loss. When Claire was about to be killed by Alexia, Steve stormed in. He was wounded by a gunshot, but he opened fire and wounded Alexia. As he and Claire checked the room, they were attacked by Alfred. Steve kicked Alfred to the floor, and they discovered that Alfred, having a split personality, was playing Alexia. They escaped the residence after the self-destruct system was activated. They both evacuated the island via a plane that closely resembled a C-130 transport. Steve piloted the plane off the island, but Alfred set the plane to autopilot and it flew to the Antarctic facility. Upon reaching Antarctica, their plane crash-landed into an Antarctic base, which was infested by the infected on the other planes. After a search of the facility, the two encountered an armed Alfred. Claire was held at gunpoint, but Steve was able to get the drop on Alfred, shooting him with his submachine guns. The impact of the rounds caused Alfred to stagger backward against a railing, which broke away and caused him to plummet down a hole. They eventually explored the outside of the facility, where an escaped Alexander found them. Steve was pushed off the roof and nearly fell to his death. Claire managed to lift him up to safety after killing Alexander. When Claire started walking, he said to her, "I swear I'll protect you next time." The two found a truck which they used to escape the structure. However, a dying Alfred managed to revive his sister, who destroyed their truck in revenge for Alfred's death. The two were captured by Alexia, and Steve was injected with the T Veronica virus. He mutated in front of Claire and attempted to kill her with a giant axe. When she locked herself up in a cell, one of Alexia's tentacles broke through the wall and grabbed a hold of her. When Steve broke into the room, he aimed his axe high, ready to kill her. But his body managed to fight against the virus, and his newly regained consciousness allowed him to strike the Alexia Pod. The remainder of the Alexia Pod caused him to hit the wall very hard. While dying, Steve quickly reverted to normal and told Claire that Chris kept his promises and he loved her, but was unable to fight anymore. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his injuries and passed away. He was only 17 at the time of his death.
Claire.
Steve? Steve? Steve?
Click this video here to find out the disturbing lore of every enemy from Resident Evil Outbreak. Thank you for watching.